It's been a while. Alright, look, you all clicked the thumbnail. I know what you're all really here for. I just figured I took this long of a break between videos and someone was bound to ask, so... the too long didn't read version is that my life's been a living hell, and I was trying to focus on myself because mental health is important. So I didn't make any videos because of that, and yeah, I still feel kind of crappy, but I'm gonna try again because I just genuinely find it fun, and I thought maybe having projects to give myself would kind of help break me out of some negative feedback loops. Maybe improve my quality of life a little. So yeah, if I sound lethargic in the next couple videos, it's just that I'm trying to find my groove, and I'm depressed. There's no way around it, alright? That's all you need to know. Yeah. With that, I'll just go ahead and get into the video. Okay. The algorithm is probably gonna hate this one. So, if you've been following social media at all in the last month, you probably know about the whole thing going on with Disney and the Florida legislative. If you don't, I am going to do my best to surmise it, since that was pretty much the whole reason and inspiration for me to make this video, that and a few other things. But overall, I encourage you to research this for yourself, because I am a white boy with a headset mic, recording in his parents' house. Okay, so, a couple things happened. First, Pixar employees leaked to the press that the executives, largely coming from the Disney side, were purposefully oppressing any inclusion of queer content within Pixar storytelling, as well as actively pushing against showing platonic affection between same-gendered characters, the main-sided films being their latest releases, Luca and Turning Red. Let me be fair, this part of the story, this is a wee bit new situation. But you know, it's always good to hear that employees are speaking out, especially considering the other thing that's been going on. Around the same time that this story was published, it was then leaked that the Walt Disney Company had been putting funds into various Florida organizations, and every single one of the Florida organizations that they were funneling their money into were then funneling the Disney money into the Don't Say Gay bill. The Don't Say Gay bill is a motion that the Florida legislative has actually recently passed. The implementation of it would make it illegal for public schools to teach about gender and sexual identity and sex education courses, unless it's straight and cis, of course, because it always is. So yeah, as you can imagine, queer community at large pretty upset about this, especially considering Disney actively profits off of the queer community. You can buy Mickey-shaped pride pins at various resorts. A couple of their TV series and Disney Plus originals right now are actively advertising the queer romances that they definitely agreed to begrudgingly. Yeah, stuff like that. And people are rightfully pissed that their money is going to laws that actively exist to harm us, especially since Bob Chapek's main response, according to the leaked internal letter, was just to say, we should promote inclusion actively in our content and not in political gestures or something like that. I'm gonna be real, I had all this scripted, and then at the time, literally just before I sat down to record all of this, the story changed, like updates started coming in. I think the main thing is that we gotta see a change in Disney before I can really give a comment. Because, like, it's shitty. They did a shitty thing. You know, Chapek said he's got a desire to learn and grow from these criticisms rather than talk back. But, you know, the shareholders meeting is coming up, and he's also, like, in the runnings to potentially get ousted from the company by said shareholders. So, that could have something to do with his comments. Also could have had something to do with the fact that the Oscars were coming up recently, and they just wanted a bit of damage control. But, grains of salt. Grains of salt. Entire world has their eye on Chapek, who's bar none the most distant and out-of-touch CEO Disney has ever had. Like, Iger was a buyout monster, raised by Eisner to be a buyout monster. And you can imagine with those two being the other two CEOs, the bar was really low. Like, so incredibly low. Like, have you been to the parks recently? I went to the parks before the whole pandemic thing came out, and, like, Chapek wasn't CEO yet, but from what I've heard, shit's only gotten worse. And, this entire time, as the story comes out, I'm reminded of a few other things. So, a few months back on my Twitter, before I got really depressed, I ran a poll to see what audiences would want my next video topic to be about, because I'd started scripting all of those topics, and I was like, I need to put time and energy into one of these and then hold off the other ones for a later date, so I'm gonna let my Twitter decide. Okay, so the winner of that poll was a script idea I had called The Films Disney Stole From. And what I was gonna do was, I was gonna talk about 3 films that Disney stole from. I was looking back at the script, and I kinda hated it. I was thinking I was gonna shelf it and, redo it a bit, look more into other films, because I wasn't sure if I liked it. But then I realized the reason I hated it was entirely because of my intended soft opening to ease into the concept. So what happened was I had a soft opening for that script where I talked about how there were a lot of similarities between The Lion King and The Land Before Time. Because, everyone talks about The Lion King being a ripoff of Kimba the White Lion or, Leo the Lion, that Tezuka anime thing. But no one ever talks about how The Lion King is dead-ass just The Land Before Time. Because it is. Because, there's a lot of stuff in the scripting and, character dynamics that really feel Land Before Time-y. This whole opening thing was just, a conspiracy theory. It was literally just me being I literally say in the script, this first one's a conspiracy theory. I'll put a timestamp in so you can skip it. I just thought it'd be funny to open up with this. So, I would go on about that conspiracy theory, and then I would talk about the other 2 films, which I believe to be actual, rip-offs, things Disney could have stolen from, or, Disney artists could have taken from. And, the whole intention of the conspiracy theory setup was just to show that everything has to be taken with a grain of salt, and there are ways in which artists can sort of borrow or lift inspirations from sources in very unobvious ways. And how, even though it's my belief that the 2 films, which I thought were rip-offs, it's entirely plausible that it's just a big coincidence, as always. I spilled my tea. So yeah, I guess, this intro is kind of supplementing that. Again, everything I say today, feel free to take with a grain of salt. I've elected to not do the Lion King Land Before Time intro because the 2 other films I was talking about actually had a different thing in common, which is that the films that I believe Disney ripped off from had queer text. And I just thought that was interesting, so I'm just going to talk about those 2 today, because I thought it'd be fun and relevant to the discussion. Alright, so the thing about these films is that one of them is more well-known and beloved, and the other was a cult film. I used to use films. One of them's technically a short, but it's a short film. So we're going to talk about the cult film first, so that I can leave y'all and get to stay longer in the video. That's the game we play. That's the YouTube game. Okay, so the cult film. This is a bit of an underground one. It's probably not something many of you have heard of. So, pump up the volume. This is a 1990 coming-of-age drom-com that exists kind of in the evolutionary space between Heathers and Mean Girls. Around that time period, it's one of those kind of films. The main story revolves around this shy new kid who spends his nights as a lewd pirate radio host. He hides his voice using a modulator thing, so no one at school knows who he is, and following the suicide of one of his classmates, the media paints this literal teenager as an enemy of the state who's corrupting their youth that needs to be stopped. And while this is going on, the radio host is actually actively trying to expose illegal practices happening within the school administration and trying to overthrow them. From that synopsis alone, you can probably see where this is going, but shush, we'll get there. We will. Also, if anything I've told you slightly interests you, I'd recommend pausing the video and just going to watch the film. It's only an hour and 30 minutes. It's available free through the Internet Archive, and I think there's a version on YouTube split into 37 parts. You'd think it wouldn't be because the copyright police, but it's there. I saw it last week, or at least last week when I wrote this script. This film has a very long and very interesting history surrounding its pre-production. I want to talk about that in depth at some point, but I'm a person who once talked about this film for 4 hours in one sitting, and I wasn't even recording myself, so I'm gonna do my best to stick with the portions that are relevant to this specific discussion, but I just want you to know, at every second, I am on the edge from going off into a tangent. I am sparing all of you today. Oh, that's good tea. That's good. I forgot to stop the recording. I'm gonna have to edit. I guess I'm telling my friends whether or not I'm editing that out or if I should put a gag in. Alright, so it's the late 80s when this film is getting shopped around, and writer-directed Alan Moyle, he's trying to get this thing made, and there's a big no-no in Hollywood at the time, which is called don't portray the queer community positively, because the AIDS epidemic is at an all-time high, and so is the homophobia epidemic. Originally in the script, the character Malcolm Kaiser, aka the boy who kills himself we talked about earlier, he was written explicitly as a gay character, but the distributors at New Line Cinema made Alan censor this Alan. Why am I talking about it? They made the director censor this plot point because they didn't want a film that portrayed a gay character as sympathetic, you know. Moyle still told Malcolm's actor, Anthony Lucero, about this plot point because he firmly believed that it was essential to the portrayal of this specific character, and I think this interview was recent. Lucero stated in an interview that even though that change had to be made, it was pretty much universally understood by the cast and crew that Malcolm was a gay character. Just as interestingly was, as a result of this, Moyle then penned up a new scene that would happen in the middle of the film's second act. So, lead up to this scene, the radio guy, Hard Harry, his name's Hard Harry, he gives this super empowering speech to his classmates following Malcolm's suicide. And it's... It's one of the best scenes in the film. I'm not gonna spoil any of it, but it is one of the best scenes in the film. And immediately following that scene, there's kind of another scene that comes in to wind down. And this scene stars a character whose name is not uttered within the film itself, but the script and the cast list for this character refers to him as Chris, so that's what we're gonna call him for simplicity's sake, and so we don't get things confused, because otherwise it's gonna be like, the radio host did that. I don't want to do that to you. So Chris is what Moyle intended Malcolm to be originally, explicitly gay character, and his scenes is one of the more gut-wrenching and heartfelt ones. So basically what happens is Harry has this thing where you can send letters into him, and he finds Chris's letter, and Chris left his phone number to him, so he could call him. So Harry calls up Chris, and Chris opens up about how he came out to his crush, and then his crush's friends who were watching them from the bushes basically commit a hate crime.
I didn't know what to do. I started to cry, but they just laughed at me, so I stopped. And they started calling me things. I don't even care about that. I mean, I know I'm into guys, but this was different.
So what did you do?
Everything they told me.
They're very vague about the exact details of it, and it's largely because they cut to a different scene halfway through to show how, the public is kind of reacting to this.
Things like that happen when you're a kid. Swallow it, Donnie. I think you're forgetting what it's like when you're young.
Come on, Shep. You get some kid to call in with some story they've concocted. It isn't real.
Who cares if it's real? People are riveted. Let's go.
And Harry comforts him and talks about how he thinks people kind of have the same needs and all need the same things. I am paraphrasing, but it's a lot more powerful in the film. So the subtext of this scene, essentially, is that Harry himself is probably not straight, and is comforting this other not straight kid the best he can. There's also a lot of subtle, more subtextual moments. There's this supporting character named Maz who he's seen flirting with a girl at the beginning of the film, but then a couple of scenes later, he's out in the middle of this field with this other kid that they go to school with, and they're listening to Hard Harry, and then he becomes visibly annoyed when a second car shows up in the field.
Fucking yuppies.
I don't care if that's once a stretch. There's no heterosexual explanation for that. There is no heterosexual explanation for what this guy and Seth Green are doing together. There's also, other small things with minor characters showing a lot of explicit affection. The main female lead, Nora, also kind of shows affection with one of her friends. Little touches like that. And in a way, it's kind of ironic that New Line made him change the suicidal character to not be gay, because it ended up with the film having a gay character who lives to the end of the story, and can even be seen in the background at the very end during this big protest. Because in a way, that's accidentally more progressive, right? Right? And in my opinion, it's what makes this film age way better than it has any right to, because you gotta understand, this is a movie about Christian Slater making fart noises and pretending to masturbate live on the radio every night. And it's the greatest piece of cinema of all time, and I will be talking about it more in the future. That's not me reassuring you, that is me reminding me myself. So long story short, because of this explicit gay text, and also, to another extent, because of the anti-government themes, New Line Cinema sabotaged the film's release. They put it out at the same time as this Oscar bait film that they had going on that they gave more marketing to. And they gave this one theatrical trailer, which in and of itself is a hate crime. I bet a lot of you clicked off the video and looked up the trailer for the film and then are like, what the fuck is this guy on? It looks horrible. There's a reason. It's homophobia. Watch the actual film. So, Pump Up the Volume bombed at the box office upon release, but it did fairly well at film festivals and pretty decent in home release sales. After that, it just fell into obscurity, and the only real references to it in pop culture are a few nods and winks to it in Mr. Robot, which also features Christian Slater. Like, Slater has said multiple times in recent years that out of his early career, this is his favorite film, and he'd be interested in doing a sequel or follow-up to find out what happened to the Hard Harry character. They're never gonna do it, but if they do, I'm gatekeeping the shit out of that. That film is for me, and me only, I swear. I'm the only person who wants this. So to recap, we have a film about an anonymous radio host who disguises their voice. This character directly challenges the school administration and convinces their student body to take a stance against the man, all while trying to keep their identity as the radio host and a student at the school secret. Hey, this sounds familiar for some reason. Okay, so the year is now 2012, and a brand new Disney Channel original movie has just premiered.
Tara! Come on up.
This is Tara, the shy girl.
Does Her Royal Shyness want to say something? I thought not.
Who's rocking a big secret.
This is Radio Rebel. You don't know who I am, but I'm one of you.
Radio Rebel is so much like Pump Up the Volume that I don't even want to surmise it because they hit so many of the same story beats, with the only major difference plot-wise being Radio Rebel ditches the overthrow the government power subplot in favor of like more teen drama and this very weird out-of-place subplot about this guy in a band. Like, why? That didn't need to be there. Like, that just took away focus from the other more interesting part of the story, in my opinion. Here's the deal. The characters in Pump Up the Volume are dealing with issues such as discrimination, some implied to be of the racial kind, suicide, and pregnancy. And in Radio Rebel, the prom gets cancelled. Like, I never went to prom, but I also respect that it can be a big thing for most people that age, and why that would be upsetting. But, like, discrimination. Prom. I know a lot of you are gonna say, oh, well, this one's more for kids, it's a made-for-TV kids film, and the other's rated R, but, like, here's the thing. I've seen DCOMs cover a variety of topics, ranging from toxic masculinity, to racism, to not learning to treat your autistic brother like shit, or they at least raise interesting questions about characters, like, what if a character from an old surfer film from before female characters were allowed to have agency suddenly came to the modern world and befriended a really feminist girl, and then she went back to the film and it, like, changed history. And most of the time they cover those topics just as well as any film put in the cinema, regardless of ratings or demographic. I want you to remember, this is the same studio that made High School Musical. High School Musical got so popular that they ended the series in the theater. I'm just saying, the issue is not that it's a Disney Channel movie, it's entirely in the way that it executes its premise. The characters in Radio Rebel are just overall less complex, not only by Pump standards, but like some of Disney Channel's own standards. Like, if you watch this film, I'm not kidding, I watched this film back to back with Lemonade Mouth when I rewatched it, and it's like, it is night and day. Like, Lemonade Mouth covers serious topics too. The main character in Lemonade Mouth, her dad is in fucking jail. You're telling me you couldn't put more intense topics in Radio Rebel? Are you kidding me? No, I don't believe that. And, like, you know, again, the main thing that sticks out to me is that Radio Rebel is just scrubbed of any queer subtext, as you can imagine. Like, you know, there's no gay character who kills himself. There's no gay character who calls into Radio Rebel's show and talks about the fact that they got hate crimed by students because they were gay. There aren't any of those, like, weird little touch moments. I guess, like, I was going to say that these two friend characters who kind of take Nora's role in the story, but to a lesser extent, were kind of gay-coded, but then I was researching and found out that they're twin brothers, like fraternal twin brothers, which I forgot. I forgot if they even mentioned that in the film. Like, I feel like they did, and it just went over my head. So yeah. But there's a more interesting pit to the story, because as it turns out, Radio Rebel's not just a ripoff, everybody. It's an adaptation of a ripoff. So Radio Rebel's character names and the few, original plot beats actually came from a book called Shrinking Violet. It was written by Danielle Joseph. It is apparently a lot more vulgar than this Disney Channel adaptation. I didn't actually read Shrinking Violet for this video, because it's $20 everywhere, and, I gotta eat this week. I don't have that money. I saw it for $10 on Amazon, but I leech off my dad's Prime account and he can see all my purchases, and I didn't want to explain to my dad that I bought the book version of Radio Rebel. I just didn't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The embarrassment was too much. Also shipping. Also, Amazon tried to buy Seattle Pride, so I'm trying not to buy anything from them. I tried to find a version online, but none of my sources had it. I'm not really here to judge the quality of the book, just the film. But I did take a look at a lot of the reviews on various sites, Amazon, Goodreads, a couple of different places, so I wasn't just pooling one area. I forgot to save it, but there was at least one review, I think it was on Goodreads, that also pointed out that this was a lot like Pump Up the Volume. In my opinion, in terms of execution, there's one thing that kind of makes Radio Rebel a weaker story overall, other than just the characters feel less deep. So, in Radio Rebel and Shrinking Violet, Radio Rebel's father works for the radio station. Mind you, Hard Harry in Pump Up the Volume is bumming this out in his basement while no one in his life supports him. His dad's school commissioner, which is how he's getting, pieces of this conspiracy pieced together, because he's seeing both what actually happens at the school and what the administration is telling people like his dad to cover their tracks. And also, they establish pretty quick that even though his dad is school commissioner, it's not going to give him any protection from his consequences. So in Radio Rebel, the titular character convinces her dad to throw a prom for the kids using radio station funds when the principal cancels their prom. And the student body in the movie, completely of their own accord, nominates Radio Rebel for prom queen as a sort of thanks, and also because they want to see if she'll reveal herself. In the book, however, according to numerous reviews, I was told that what happens is the radio station holds a contest where they auction off a date with Radio Rebel at her prom, which is gross. I would have preferred if they kept that plot point, actually, because I feel like it would have made it more unique as a story than just Pump Up the Volume ripoff. And, I also kind of want to see that play out, with that character. I feel like that would actually be, an interesting thing to explore in writing. Obviously, it's shitty in real life, but, I would if they accurately and very complexly explored the emotions this character might go through in that kind of event, I would be interested in seeing it play out. But, I guess someone at Disney didn't like that, so they said, nah. I want to real quick quote the original version of this script that I wrote over a year ago, and then didn't use any of. Disney always picks the ground of, we aren't going to say anything that would sway our brand one way or the other for the sake of marketability. I find this to be a shame, because based on the more positive reception, I presume the storyline about a girl having her alluring femininity essentially auctioned off to any lucky winner and being pissed about it was handled somewhat well and would have made for a more interesting product overall. I wrote that paragraph so long ago, and the fact that the first half of it hasn't aged at all says so much. I don't think it's a terrible stretch to say that the original novel itself, even though I never read it, definitely took heavy inspiration from Pump Up the Volume, even just in its premise. I saw reviews comparing the two directly, so I'm not the only one who noticed this. Another thing, this gets kind of back into conspiracy theory territory, but Radio Rebel was kind of a meme on TikTok last year because of all these weird faces that Debbie Ryan makes in the film. And every time I saw one of her weird faces, I just thought to myself, man, this girl is trying so hard to mimic Christian Slater. I don't know if Debbie Ryan had seen Pump Up the Volume, or if someone on the production team had seen Pump Up the Volume, and she was directed to act that way. But, like, if you've seen Christian Slater, you know he has a very quirky kind of way of acting. It's very, like, hard to explain, but, like, he really he really bodies his entire performance, and, like, he really plays around with his facial expressions as he delivers lines. And I don't know. Every time I saw those faces, I was like, this feels so much like someone trying to mimic Christian Slater. Also of note, we are going from a film about an actual rebellious teenager who actively protests his school for doing illegal shit, and then gets arrested for it because he was also doing illegal shit, to a film where a performative rebel almost never has to worry about her identity being found out until the third act because her daddy owns the radio station and she's being protected by the very powers she claims to oppose. It's almost like one of these was a largely independent project that got wide distribution, and the other was made by a monopoly. Okay, I've made all my points about Pump Up the Volume, so let's move on to the... I'm just gonna finish this tea because I keep spilling it everywhere, and I got this nice new shirt on, and I don't want to wreck it. But yeah, I've made all my points, so let's move on to the other one, shall we? Okay, so... a couple years back, around the time that Disney Plus was launching, both because they needed Disney Plus original content and also so that they could give their animators projects to kind of push more experimental art styles and storytelling, both Disney and Pixar began two initiatives. For Pixar, we had the Spark Shorts initiative, and for Disney Animation, we had the Short Circuit initiative. Again, the main idea behind both of these was that anyone within the company could pitch an idea. Be they a well-versed employee who's been there for years and knows what they're doing, or someone who's maybe been there less long and hasn't quite worked their way up the ladder yet. They could all pitch an idea into a group, into like a hat, and they would draw the ideas out of a hat. And if enough people liked the idea, that idea would get a team, a budget, and a deadline so that they could develop it into a little short. Side note, Wikipedia classifies these as independent short films. They are not, they were produced by the Walt Disney Corporation. And like, yeah, they had less restraints on them, but like, it's still Disney funding them. They still work for Disney. The program only existed within Disney themselves. I think classifying them as independent is just kind of wrong. I don't think that Wikipedia should. A lot of these shorts ended up being released online on YouTube ahead of the launch of Disney Plus, I think. I think both Pearl and Kit Bull got released that way, and both of those were very well received, and they were a little, with Pearl especially, like, they were a little more, like, out there for something that Disney or Pixar would produce, like, with the Disney executives, right? So the big trend I noticed is that people really love these Spark shorts that Pixar's are putting out, and no one gave a shit about the Short Circuit shorts. Like, I looked at the Short Circuit list, and I thought, okay, maybe I'll have seen, like, at least one other person who talked about it. I had not seen a single damn person talk about any of these films. Like, it's funny, because, like, there's actually a lot of quirky ones in there. Like, there's this dinosaur barbarian guy. It's funny, and like I think the issue is like the first, when you go to Short Circuits, the first short that pops up is this one called Puddles. It's about this boy who finds puddles that go into a different world, but the conflict is that his older sister is basically like on her phone the entire time and doesn't notice. And yeah, that's kind of a boomer story, so like I think that's what turns people off from this as opposed to like the Short Circuit ones. And like, I'm only briefly covering my thoughts, but I think the main takeaway I have is that Short Circuits, for the most part, really only feels interested in telling gags, and Spark Shorts is interested in actually pushing their storytelling as well as their animation. And like, this is just like what I know. I feel like the Spark Shorts had more compelling ideas overall. And like, Spark Shorts actually had a gay storyline one called Out, which I thought was actually handled pretty well. But there was one thing I noticed about the Short Circuit films. So one of them is scarily similar to a different film that was actually independently produced. It was like crowdfunded online, and then it released to critical acclaim, and it was even given a few awards the year it came out, and a few nominations. Like, this was a short film that was so popular, so well loved, and got so much attention that it was actually shortlisted for the Academies for Best Animated Short, so you know, it was a pretty big deal. This is In a Heartbeat. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's very cute. It's literally free on YouTube. Go watch it right now if you haven't seen it. But the Disney Short Circuit film, just a thought, in my opinion, struck very similar chords. I guess on the surface, the story of trying to hide the fact that you have a crush from someone is pretty common, even in non-queer circles. I've seen both though, and like, I don't know, some about these just feels too much the same. Like, again, as I said at the beginning of this, I still feel like there's some benefit of the doubt to be given in places. But like, the story beats are incredibly similar. Numerous shots in Just a Thought look kind of like someone saw In a Heartbeat and was trying to like redraw it from memory. And like, I know it's not impossible, but given the amount of acclaim and attention In a Heartbeat got when it came out, I feel like at least someone on the team had to have seen it at some point, because if not, this is the world's most insane coincidence. The only key difference other than art direction is that In a Heartbeat is about a queer romance and Just a Thought is about a straight one. And also, I had to pay money to watch Just a Thought, but you don't, because I found out, as I was looking up stuff for this video, that the entire short is available on Vimeo, and it doesn't have dialogue. Don't give Disney your money right now. So, In a Heartbeat is about a kid named Sherwin who catches the gay for another classmate. The other classmate has a name, but like, I'm tired. So, Sherwin gets so emotional about like his crush that his heart literally bursts out of his chest and it tries to hook the two of them up, but obviously Sherwin is scared to confess these feelings and tries to hide away his heart. And Just a Thought is like this comic strip world with all these thought bubbles, and they shade it like an old comic book with like the dot things, you know, like pop art. And I feel like this could have been developed in another direction, but instead, it's just about this kid, Ollie. I learned his name is Ollie. Thank you, Disney fan Wikia. Ollie has a crush on this girl, and he tries to hide away his thought bubble because it really wants to reveal these thoughts. And I don't know. When you hear the premise of like this comic book world where your thoughts become bubbles that everyone can see, putting it into a romance story just feels like squandering the premise like a little bit. I don't want to say squandered, but like, I feel like you could have developed this in so many other directions, and they would have been more interesting than just romance, you know? Like, you could have had it like the kid has an attention deficit disorder or something, and his thought bubbles display like his sporadic thought process, like differently from how his peers do. Or maybe like, since they're in a classroom setting and it could be entirely about the daydreams that the students are having, and the teacher keeps attempting to keep their students focused, like something else. I feel like the imagery of the thought bubbles and other people's perception of their peers could be so interesting, and they do a couple of funny gags with it, but like, that's really it. They just, like, they do a couple of funny like, these are I want to make it clear, this isn't like a time thing, because these two films are about the same length of time, I want to say. Like, it's just entirely in the execution of the premise. Also, this is unrelated to the story, but this is the only one of the short circuits I feel this way about. I think the animation could have used a bit of touching up, or maybe it should have been hand-drawn instead of cel-shaded, I don't know. I think it looks great in screenshots, but whenever it moves, like, they do sort of like this thing where they basically put the renders on they render out the characters, and then, like, they basically projection map the dot effects over the characters, so that the characters move, but the dots stay perfectly still. They're like a still file. So it looks like the dots are moving in the opposite direction as the characters move. You know, like Chowder? You ever seen Chowder? It's basically like the 3D rendered version of Chowder. And like, here's the thing, I think it works on Chowder because it's 2D, and it doesn't work here because it's 3D. Like, I feel like this is just a design principle that really only works in 2D. And I only say this because I had to stop this is a short film. It's not very long, but I had to pause in the middle of it because I got like sick. Like, the visuals just made me feel ill. Like, I was motion sick, legitimately, from watching that film. And there's also like, I also have like other slight critiques, like the animation feels too floaty. Ironically, like, not on the bubble, not just on like the thought bubbles, but like on the characters. Like, I feel like some of them need more snap to them when they move, or like when a movement ends, but like they just, I don't know. That's just me personally though. I still think, like, you know, given the money and given like the concept, it looks pretty good. And like, it seemed like the team was legitimately proud of the product they put out, and I'm not gonna take that away from them just because I have critiques, you know? So in both shorts, despite the protagonist's efforts, the feelings get revealed, but the punch feels a lot less impactful on Just a Thought. And I'm sorry, but it's entirely because it's a straight romance. Like, there isn't any of the emotional baggage that comes with being a queer kid in society that doesn't think kids are emotionally intelligent enough to understand queer concepts. Every queer person you've met has endured some form of emotional trauma entirely because of the fact that they are the person they are. Like, I just want you to, I'm gonna show clips from both of these, but like, compare Sherwin's emotions to Ollie's emotions in both of these reveal scenes. Like, Sherwin's peers are legitimately looking at him with expressions of disgust. They can't stand the fact that he's gay and they go to school with a gay kid. And then the straight kid, like, he gets sort of made fun of, but, like, it's in that manner where you know everyone is going to forget about it by the time the next thing that they can point and jeer at happens. Like, the reveal for him is entirely played off as this look he's imagining that that this girl is, like, his wife and they have a lot of kids gag. Like, and because it's a gag, I just treat it like a gag. Like, I just treat the reveal itself as a gag. Like, I don't feel sorry for this kid. I just want to laugh at him as well. Like, that's all that really just a thought is. It's just a long gag. I guess that's not a bad thing, but again, this is a very compelling concept in my opinion. And the fact that it just feels like it ripped off a gay short film that came out years earlier rubs wrong. I guess in the end, seeing as no one seems to give a fuck about the entire Short Circuit Initiative films, that, like, it doesn't really matter all that much. But man, for, like, a project whose entire purpose was to experiment with new kinds of visual design and storytelling, having it stray so close to a done-before idea really makes it feel like a black sheep, even in, like, this specific group of shorts. I do like the concept of just a thought overall. I feel like it could have been, I just would have handled it differently personally. But that's just me. I don't really got that much more to talk about. And, like, you know, again, like, what I said at the beginning still holds true. While I am calling these things rip-offs for the point of this video as, like, an analytical thing, you should take some stuff with a grain of salt. And also, just because something's a rip-off of a different thing, that doesn't mean work doesn't go into them. Because it does. A lot of work goes into making anything, even, like, the worst bottom-of-the-barrel animated thing. Even a live-action work that looks like it was filmed on a camcorder. Work always goes into stuff. And sometimes a rip-off can be just as good and stand on its own from whatever it takes influence from. And I will admit that myself. I just, again, noticed, like, these two films are both Disney films that take a lot of the same beats as queer media, and then erase all the queer undertones. I didn't like that, and I don't like that it's a thing that has happened more than once. And, you know, it's entirely possible that there's more examples of this that I just haven't seen because of my own personal experiences with the media I indulge in. Like, I'm serious, like, go down to the comments, and, like, if there's a film that you feel like Disney stole from, if there's, like, a queer film you think Disney stole from, talk about that. Like, I want to hear, I might want to, like, do a follow-up to this video at some point. I think the main takeaway I want from this, though, is never credit the Walt Disney Company as a company for even the barest crumb of representation, because Disney doesn't give it to you. Disney is the name of a man who died 60 years ago, and then the imagery that this man built around himself has since just been used as a shield to protect a corporation from criticism. Disney is only as capable of being creative as the artists who work there, and those artists have names, okay? Disney didn't give you Lumidity, Dana Terrence and the Owl House team did, and then Disney canceled the show. Disney didn't put a gay couple in the Proud Family reboot, Bruce W. Smith and his team did. Disney didn't put the gay cop in Onward, the actress ad-libbed it in, and then the Onward team decided that they should keep that in. Hell, you remember when, like, the Frozen directors said that a character who had 2 minutes of screen time in the entire film was gay and had a husband, and the executives made him retcon it, like, a week later? No one ever talks about the Oaken thing anymore. Like, why do we never talk about this? This happened in, like, 2013, and no one ever talks about it anymore. Why? Disney, so far, doesn't make pushes for queer representation, okay? They passively allow it on occasion under the pretense that it'll grab them a quick butt. This statement definitely doesn't apply to Disney. It can apply to a lot of places, even the government, but Disney's probably the most infuriating example, partly because they do control a large portion of the government. And, you know, maybe if these corporations had more of these artists and less of these businessmen trying to increase profit margins at the top of the food chain, I wouldn't be here talking about this right now. Again, as of the time I wrote this, an update to that story I talked about at the beginning came, where the Disney higher-ups are saying that they're going to try to do better. But I don't want, like, just some apology letter. I want results. I want action, okay? These artists belong to their communities. These artists want to represent their experiences and the experiences of other people in those communities in their work. These artists deserve better payment and working conditions to do so. I love the films that come out of these teams and this studio, and I want to be able to support those artists without feeling like I'm contributing to the erasure and eradication of my own community. Support your local union, support the activists, support the artists.